Hello and welcome to the video. My name is Wade Daniel Smith, and this video is about more on the speed versus power myth of combat sports. And as I said in a previous video, the formula for power or energy per unit time or work per unit time only uses the first order of mass, but it uses the third order or the cube of velocity. So it turns out that it is a myth that a bigger fighter hits harder than a smaller fighter. Let's say if the bigger fighter is 10% bigger, that is 10% more massive, and if you assume that a smaller fighter is then 10% faster, the 10% faster fighter will actually hit 21% harder than the 10% bigger fighter. That's what the formula says. And we know it's right because it works in wind turbines and it works in water turbines and it works on everything else. So a 10% smaller fighter who happens to be 10% faster than the bigger fighter actually punches and kicks 21% harder. So speed versus power is a complete myth that the announcers and whatnot made up, that they don't even know what the heck they're talking about. Unfortunately for them, I'm both an expert martial artist and I have a lot of physics training. And I know the difference. Uh, Speed cubed is directly proportional to power. All right. So uh all these supposed world champions, even in MMA and stuff, where like they get crowned, or in boxing or in kickboxing, they get crowned world champion with 12 to less than 20 fights. It's not even possible to narrow down who the world champion is or ought to be in that few many fights, even in a single weight class. All right. That's like the UFC, the first 8 seasons or so of the UFC, where they just had 8 random fighters that some of them were so out of shape or so old that they had no business in the tournament to begin with, including the first couple of them that Royce Gracie fought the first time. Like he had the easiest route to champion the first tournament that I've ever seen in my life. He fought a 51-year-old has been who had no idea what the heck he was doing. Uh, uh, but and by the way, if I fought Royce Gracie, even right now, medically disabled, if I fought him, I would do a better job than anybody that fought him other than the ones that beat him. I would probably beat him my own self, even right now, with 50% of the grip in my left hand going and 50% numbness in both feet. I could probably still beat him because I beat second and third degree Gracie black belts and tapped them out even without striking, much less if striking is allowed. I tap out second and third degree Gracie black belts pretty easily, actually. I know because I was a member of the Gracie Dojo for a year and a half, and I beat the professional fighters that had 20 some odd wins easily at grappling. And I wasn't even from a grappling style. I was from primarily a striking style, and I beat the Gracie Dojo that they are directly related to Royce Gracie and are trained by Royce Gracie's uncle. And I beat them easily and laughed at it because I told the assistant instructor's wife, because she was the secretary at the time. She was like, "This man's a professional fighter," and I was like, "I was trained by somebody that eats professional fighters for lunch." I laughed at her and him before I even joined the school, and the first thing I did was tap him out 3 times in about a 5 minute span, and he never could tap me out. I laughed at him. I was like, I said, like, I was trained by a medal of valor winner. And they thought I was lying repeatedly. I have over 4,000 hours training under Marines, including 200 hours training under a Medal of Valor winner. And about 1 hour training under him is as good as 10 or 20 hours training under anyone else. But anyway, I have a hard time watching MMA, even though it's real. There's actually so many rules that it's not real. We fought with less rules than that when we sparred in the dojo. We had as few rules as we could get away with without killing one another. It's how we sparred full contact in the dojo. If I remember right, the only thing that wasn't allowed is no eye gouging, no biting, no throat jab. Groin kicks were encouraged, and that was the rules. Anything else went. No biting, no eye gouge, and no throat jab was the rules, if I remember right. And we were literally encouraged to use groin kicks. And that was the rules. Any striking or grappling whatsoever other than that was allowed. I can't watch points. It is so fake that it is an absolute freaking joke. They're not even fast point spars. I don't know what they think they're doing. And then you wonder why the gold medalists at the Olympics got beat up from the 2020 Olympics. Multiple gold medalists from karate and taekwondo got beat up by unskilled attackers in street fights because somebody that was unskilled just saw that they could beat the hell out of a black belt. So they recognized them and attacked them just to see if they could beat the hell out of a black belt. And yes, they could beat the hell out of a paper black belt. Even the world champion paper black belt, because that's all they were. When the guy knocked out the one that stepped into the kick, because that's what happened, he stepped into the kick, because I was watching it with my family right there that day in 2020 Olympics, and I told my mother, I said, watch this. This dude's about to get knocked out. Every time he throws a punch, he drops his guard, and I said, watch it. He's about to get knocked out, and I didn't yet know that knocking your opponent out was for some reason against the rules of Olympic karate. Well, sure enough, he stepped into a high kick and got knocked out cold. And I'm talking about a real knockout. He was on the ground defenseless for about 2 minutes after getting knocked out. And they stripped the other guy who would have won the fight of the gold medal and gave it to the guy who just got his ass kicked for a good reason, because he dropped his guard every time he went to throw a punch. And I predicted he was going to get knocked out 30 seconds before he got knocked out. I said, watch this. He's fixing to get knocked out. He drops his guard every time he throws a punch. And sure enough, bam, he got hit because he stepped right into the kick. Well, if it's a combat sport, a knockout is the goal. They ought to change that rule in the Olympics. If it's a combat sport, a knockout ought to be an automatic win, not an automatic loss. That is preposterous. But yeah, don't call yourself the world champion of anything. I don't care if it's the world champion of jacks if you haven't played but against 18 people. And this includes people like Israel Adesanya that got crowned world champion in MMA entirely too soon. How can you be the world champion when you haven't fought everybody? Like I said in the other video, it took Rocky Marciano 42 fights before they gave him a title bout. And then he won that, and then he defended it successfully 6 times, and then he retired as the champion. And that's about right. Becoming the champion in 10 or 15 fights doesn't even make sense. There's way more people than that in your weight class worldwide that want to fight you. How can you be the champion? But anyway, I'm getting a little off topic. Speed, power rather, is directly proportional to the mass of the moving fluid, but it's directly proportional to the cube of the velocity of the moving fluid. Therefore, the faster puncher or kicker hits way, way harder than the bigger puncher or kicker. Which is why I was saying on the other video that women martial artists can actually beat men martial artists, because they're actually faster. They're actually hitting harder, strangely.